My name is Mackenzie Taylor, 28, and I've built a restaurant empire that most people in my hometown can't even imagine. Yet whenever I return to visit, my sister Heather makes sure I know exactly where I stand in the family hierarchy beneath her. I flew in for Mom's 60th birthday, hoping this time would be different. I should have known better when Heather chose Bellamy's for the celebration. What I didn't expect was being publicly seated with the staff until the owner walked in and everything changed. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my humiliation turned into my sister's most shocking revelation. Growing up in Maplewood, population 8,762, shaped me more than I like to admit. Our family wasn't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. My father Gary worked as a manager at the local manufacturing plant, and my mother Linda taught third grade at Maplewood Elementary. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on Elm Street, the kind with creaky floorboards and family photos covering every wall. From an early age, I knew I wanted more than our small town could offer. While Heather, 3 years my senior, embraced Maplewood life, I spent hours watching cooking shows and sketching restaurant floor plans on notebook paper. By 15, I was working weekends at Tony's Diner, saving every dollar for culinary school. Heather followed the expected path. She married her high school sweetheart Brad right after graduation, secured a job at the local bank, and bought a house 2 streets over from our parents. She did everything right according to Maplewood standards. When I left for culinary school in New York at 18, the family dynamics shifted. My father, always the perfectionist, questioned my risky career path. "Restaurants fail all the time, Kenzie," he'd say during our increasingly rare phone calls. Mom tried to mediate, but her peacekeeping efforts often fell short. "Your sister worries about you," she'd explain after Heather made some cutting remark about my big city delusions. I understood what remained unsaid. Heather wasn't worried. She was threatened. After culinary school, I worked 80-hour weeks under renowned chefs, learning every aspect of the restaurant business. When I partnered with my culinary school friend Rachel to open our first farm-to-table restaurant in Brooklyn, no one from my family attended the grand opening. Heather was pregnant with her first child, Mom couldn't leave her classroom mid-semester, and Dad claimed work obligations. The restaurant thrived despite their absence. Food critics praised our innovative menu and commitment to local ingredients. Within 3 years, we opened a second location, then a third. By 26, I was running a restaurant group with locations across the Northeast. Each success widened the gap between my family and me. Holiday visits became exercises in tension management. Heather would parade her children's achievements while asking pointed questions about my personal life. "Still single? I guess your career keeps you too busy for relationships," she'd say, glancing knowingly at our parents. Last Thanksgiving, things reached a breaking point when Heather commented that my fancy restaurants probably wouldn't survive in a real town with real people. I left early the next morning, skipping Christmas altogether. So when Mom's 60th birthday approached, I hesitated before committing to attend. Rachel noticed my reluctance during our weekly management meeting. "Family is complicated," she said, reviewing quarterly projections. "But you'll regret missing your mom's birthday more than you'll regret enduring your sister's pettiness." She was right. I booked a first-class ticket to St. Louis and reserved a rental car for the hour-long drive to Maplewood. I'd recently closed a deal acquiring a small restaurant group with locations throughout the Midwest, including one in St. Louis that had been struggling. The trip would allow me to check on the new acquisition while fulfilling family obligations. The flight and drive gave me time to rehearse responses to inevitable questions and comments. I arrived at my parents' house on Friday afternoon, steeling myself before knocking. Mom opened the door, her face lighting up. "Mackenzie, you're really here." Her hug felt like home, the only part of Maplewood that still did. Dad emerged from his workshop, wiping sawdust from his hands. "There's our big shot restaurateur," he said, his tone walking the line between pride and mockery. "How was your flight?" "First class all the way, I bet," came Heather's voice from the kitchen. She appeared in the hallway, dish towel in hand, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Some of us have been here all week helping with preparations." And there it was, the first jab, barely 5 minutes after arrival. "I brought champagne," I offered, holding up the vintage Dom Perignon I'd carried on the plane. "And I cleared my schedule for the entire weekend." "How generous of you to make time," Heather replied, taking the bottle. "We've got plenty of sparkling wine already, but I'm sure this costs more than what we bought." I bit my tongue, remembering a particularly vicious fight when we were teenagers. Heather had borrowed my new sweater without asking, then accidentally spilled cranberry juice on it. When I confronted her, she burst into tears, claiming I cared more about material things than family. Our parents grounded me for making her cry. 20 years later, Heather still wielded tears like weapons, and I still struggled to defend myself without appearing callous. This weekend would require all my professional diplomacy skills, the same ones I used when negotiating with difficult investors or handling kitchen staff conflicts. Mom sensed the tension and quickly suggested I get settled in my old bedroom. As I carried my suitcase upstairs, I heard Heather's stage whisper to Dad, "I told you she'd show up with something expensive to make us look bad." Looking around my childhood bedroom, now converted into a guest room with nautical decor, I wondered if coming home had been a mistake. The walls that once displayed my culinary competition medals now featured generic seascape prints. The only evidence of my youth was a small, framed photo of me at 16, holding a trophy from a regional cooking competition. I unpacked slowly, listening to the familiar sounds of my family continuing preparations downstairs. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Landed safely? Restaurant empire still standing without you." I smiled and replied, "Made it. Already regretting it." "How's the Chicago location doing after the menu change?" Work talk was safer than facing the minefield downstairs. But I couldn't hide forever. I took a deep breath, put on my most confident smile, the one I used for investor meetings, and headed down to join my family, determined to make this visit different from all the others. Saturday morning brought chaos to the Taylor household. Mom's birthday celebration was scheduled for 7 that evening, and Heather had transformed into a 5'4" tornado of commands and criticisms. "Dad, those balloons need to be higher. Mackenzie, can you actually help instead of checking your phone every 5 minutes?" I silently slipped my phone into my pocket, though I'd only been confirming our reservation at Bellamy's. I'd offered to handle that detail since Heather mentioned it was where Mom wanted to celebrate. "What can I do to help?" I asked, keeping my tone deliberately light. "The streamers need to be hung, but don't do it if you're worried about breaking a nail." Heather thrust a step stool and roll of crepe paper at me. For hours of decorating, cleaning, and avoiding conversational landmines later, the house looked festive enough for a magazine spread. I contributed more than Heather acknowledged, including arranging an elaborate flower delivery that had Mom tearing up when it arrived. "These are gorgeous, sweetie," Mom said, admiring the arrangement of her favorite lilies mixed with seasonal blooms. "You didn't have to spend so much." "She's got money to burn," Heather muttered, just loud enough for me to hear while adjusting a banner. I focused on Mom's smile instead of Heather's barb. "I also got you something special to open later," I said, referring to the vintage pearl necklace I'd found at an estate auction in New York, a piece remarkably similar to one our grandmother had owned and Mom had always admired. Around noon, relatives began arriving: Uncle Jim and Aunt Patricia from Dad's side, Mom's sister Debbie with her husband Frank, and various cousins I'd barely recognized. Each arrival reinforced how disconnected I'd become from my extended family. Conversations highlighted my outsider status. "So you own restaurants now?" "Like Applebee's?" asked my cousin Brandon. "Not exactly," I began, but was interrupted by Heather carrying in another tray of snacks. "Mackenzie's places are much fancier," she said. You probably couldn't afford the appetizers, much less an entree. Brandon looked uncomfortable. Must be nice, he mumbled before wandering off to the beverage table. By late afternoon, I escaped to my room for a moment of peace and to change for dinner. I selected a simple black dress, expensive but not ostentatious, and pearl earrings that would complement Mom's gift. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel with a surprising update on our newest acquisition. Just got word that the owner of Bellamy's in St. Louis wants to meet next week to discuss transition. Apparently business is better than we thought. I texted back, actually heading there tonight for Mom's birthday. Weird coincidence. Rachel replied, small world. Enjoy dinner. Try the duck confit, it's their specialty. When I returned downstairs, Heather was organizing everyone for the drive to the restaurant. We've got carpools arranged, she announced. Mackenzie, you can follow in your rental. We need the space in the family cars for everyone else. Another subtle exclusion, but I just nodded. No problem. I'll meet you there. The 20-minute drive to Bellamy's gave me time to collect myself. The restaurant was situated in a renovated historic building in the more upscale neighboring town. Its stone facade and tasteful signage spoke of careful branding. Our company had acquired it along with 4 other establishments in a package deal, but I hadn't personally visited this location yet. I recognized quality when I saw it, though. The valet service was prompt, the lighting in the entrance perfectly calibrated, and the host's greeting warm without being obsequious. My professional assessment: this place had good bones and excellent training. No wonder it had been the crown jewel of the acquisition. Inside, I spotted my family already being led to a private dining room. Heather was at the front, speaking animatedly with the host, while Mom walked arm in arm with Dad. I quickened my pace to catch up. There you are, Mom said warmly. Isn't this place beautiful? I've always wanted to come here. It's lovely, I agreed, noting the expert balance of traditional and contemporary design elements. My trained eye caught details others might miss: the quality of the table linens, the perfectly polished glassware, the fresh flowers that complemented the color scheme. As we entered the private room, I watched Heather speaking with the maitre d', gesturing toward the seating arrangement. A round table for 12 dominated the center of the room, with a smaller rectangular table positioned near the service entrance. Heather turned to the gathering family with a bright smile. Everyone, I've arranged the seating. Mom and Dad are here, she indicated the center of the round table, with Aunt Debbie and Uncle Frank on either side. I'll be next to Dad with Brad, and then the rest of you can find your places according to the cards. I moved toward the main table, searching for my name card, when Heather placed a hand on my arm. Oh, Mackenzie, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Since you're in the restaurant business, I thought you'd appreciate sitting with the staff. You can give them pointers or whatever it is you do. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to us, Mom looking mortified, Dad shifting uncomfortably, cousins suddenly fascinated with the artwork on the walls. I'm sorry, I managed, certain I'd misheard. Heather gestured to the small table by the service entrance. The staff takes their breaks there. I thought it would be perfect for you to sit with them. You know, shop talk and all that. Mom understands, don't you, Mom? Before Mom could respond, Heather continued, besides, we're one seat short at the main table with cousin Tiffany bringing her new boyfriend. It works out perfectly. I stood frozen, processing the deliberate humiliation. This wasn't a misunderstanding or oversight, this was calculated. The family watched, waiting for my reaction, ready to judge whether I'd make a scene at Mom's birthday. In that moment, I had a choice: create conflict on Mom's special night or swallow my pride. Looking at Mom's distressed expression, I knew what I had to do. That's thoughtful, I said, my hospitality training enabling the calm response despite my internal fury. I'd love to chat with the staff. The collective tension in the room dissipated slightly, though Mom started to protest. Heather, that's not appropriate. It's fine, Mom, I interrupted gently. Really? Let's focus on celebrating you tonight. Heather's smile held triumph as she guided everyone else to their seats at the main table. I made my way to the small table, feeling like I was 16 again, outmaneuvered by my sister in a game I never wanted to play. The staff table was positioned in an awkward corner where the private dining room connected to the kitchen corridor. 3 chairs surrounded a table covered with a white cloth that didn't quite match the quality of those in the main dining area. Clearly, this wasn't meant for guests. I sat down, my back straight, summoning the poise I developed through years of business dinners and investor meetings. From this vantage point, I could see my entire family settling in, Mom still glancing worriedly in my direction, Dad studiously avoiding eye contact, and Heather animatedly directing everyone to their proper seats. Excuse me, came a hesitant voice. I looked up to see a young woman in Bellamy's server uniform, crisp white shirt, black slacks, burgundy apron, looking confused. Are you waiting for someone? Apparently I'm joining the staff table tonight, I explained, attempting a smile. Family politics. The server, her name tag read Amanda, blinked in surprise. Oh! I'm so sorry, but this isn't actually a customer table. It's where we sometimes take quick breaks or organize check presenters. I understand. My sister thought it would be appropriate for me to sit here since I work in the restaurant industry. Even saying it aloud made the humiliation sharper. Amanda's eyes widened with embarrassment. I don't know what to say. Would you like me to speak with the manager? We can definitely find you a place at your party's table. The thought of causing a scene, having managers intervene, everyone watching as accommodations were made, felt worse than simply enduring my current position. It's fine, really. I'd rather not make this a bigger issue. I gestured toward my family. It's my mom's 60th birthday. I don't want to disrupt her celebration. Amanda looked unconvinced, but nodded. If you're sure. I'm about to go on break anyway, so I'll join you if that's okay. Her kindness made a lump form in my throat. I'd appreciate the company, actually. As Amanda sat down, I caught Heather watching us with poorly concealed satisfaction before turning back to her conversation with Aunt Patricia. I pulled out my phone and quickly texted Rachel, "You won't believe this." Seated at staff table. Literally. Heather's doing. Rachel's response was immediate. What? Want me to call with a fake emergency? I almost smiled at her loyalty. No. Enduring for Mom's sake. We'll explain later. 2 more servers joined our table shortly, a college-aged guy named Tyler and a middle-aged woman named Jessica. Both looked confused by my presence until Amanda quietly explained the situation. That's messed up, Tyler said bluntly, unwrapping a granola bar. Family can be worse than the Saturday night rush. Jessica nodded sympathetically. My sister once forgot to tell me about our family reunion until the day after it happened. I drove 8 hours to surprise everyone, only to find they'd all gone home. Their attempts to normalize my humiliation through their own family horror stories were touching. I found myself asking questions about their experiences working at Bellamy's, partly from professional interest and partly to distract myself from the painful awareness of being excluded from my mother's birthday dinner. The management's pretty good, Jessica explained. The previous owner was hands-off, but things have been uncertain since we heard about the acquisition. No one's told us much about the new company. I nearly choked on my water. If they only knew. At the main table, appetizers were being served. Mom kept glancing over, her enjoyment clearly diminished by my absence. At one point, she excused herself and walked over to our table. "Mackenzie, this is ridiculous. Come join us, honey. We can squeeze in another chair." I caught Heather watching, her expression darkening. "Mom, it's okay. I'm having a nice conversation here. Go enjoy your birthday dinner." "But, please, Mom, I don't want to create awkwardness. We can catch up later." She reluctantly returned to her seat, stopping to say something to Heather that made my sister's face flush. Small victories. As the main courses arrived for my family, I ordered my own meal at the staff table. The servers insisted on treating me like a proper guest despite the circumstances. Tyler even snuck extra bread to our table, making a show of proper service that had me laughing despite everything. My mind drifted to a summer day when I was 12 and Heather 15. Our parents had taken us to the community pool where Heather's friends were gathered. When I tried to join their conversation, Heather loudly announced I couldn't sit with them because I was just a kid. I'd spent that afternoon alone at the opposite end of the pool, pretending not to care while fighting back tears. 16 years later, and here we were again. Different setting, same dynamic. From the main table, I heard Heather's voice rise as toasts began. I'd like to thank everyone important in Mom's life for being here tonight. Her emphasis on important wasn't subtle. Jessica, who had returned from serving another table, noticed my expression. You know, I've worked in restaurants for 20 years, and I've seen all kinds of family drama. The ones who try to hurt you the most are usually the ones who feel the most threatened. I nodded, surprised by her insight. My sister's always been competitive, but this feels different. More deliberate. People don't go to these lengths unless they're deeply insecure, Jessica said, refilling my water glass. Trust me, I've served enough family gatherings to recognize the signs. As dessert was being served at the main table, accompanied by a rendition of Happy Birthday that I joined from afar, Jessica suddenly straightened up. Heads up. The owner's making rounds tonight. He usually checks in on private parties. I felt a flicker of professional interest. According to our acquisition paperwork, Marcus Bennett was staying on as managing partner through the transition, a name on documents I'd never met in person. Just so you know, Jessica added, leaning in conspiratorially, the servers all love him. Best boss I've had in 20 years of restaurant work. We're all nervous about the new owners. If she only knew who was sitting beside her. From across the room, I heard the maitre d' announce, Mr. Bennett would like to personally ensure everything is to your satisfaction this evening. Heather, ever eager to be the center of attention, turned toward the entrance with a gracious smile. How lovely. We're celebrating my mother's 60th birthday. And then Marcus Bennett walked in, his confident stride and attentive gaze immediately marking him as the owner before he even spoke. I recognized his face from the acquisition meetings, though we'd never met in person. Our legal teams had handled most of the direct negotiations. What happened next would change the entire dynamic of the evening. As I watched Marcus Bennett greeting my family, I tried to appear casual despite my awkward seating arrangement. He moved around the table with practiced charm, shaking hands and asking about everyone's meal. Mom was beaming at the special attention, Dad looked impressed, and Heather was practically preening. Jessica whispered, he does this with all the special occasions. Wait until he brings out the complimentary champagne. I nodded, wondering if I should make myself scarce before he recognized my name. The acquisition wasn't public knowledge yet, and I didn't want to create an uncomfortable situation. But before I could decide, Tyler returned from the kitchen. Chef says to tell you the duck confit is exceptional tonight, he told me, unaware of my connection to the restaurant. He's sending out a plate complimentary since you're stuck at the break table. That's very kind, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Please thank him for me. The conversation with the servers had actually become engaging. Amanda was describing her plans to attend culinary school, and I found myself offering genuine advice about which programs to consider. The techniques you learn are important, I explained, but the connections you make can be even more valuable. My business partner Rachel and I met in culinary school, and, excuse me, a new voice interrupted. I looked up to see Marcus Bennett standing beside our table, his expression curious rather than upset at finding a guest seated with his staff. I wanted to check if everything is satisfactory at this table as well, he said, his tone professional but with a hint of confusion. He glanced at Jessica, who looked suddenly nervous. Everything's excellent, I assured him. Your staff has been incredibly accommodating. He nodded, still puzzled, then his gaze sharpened as he took a closer look at me. I'm sorry, but you seem familiar. Have we met before? This was exactly what I'd hoped to avoid. I hesitated, aware that Jessica, Amanda, and Tyler were watching the exchange with interest. I don't believe we've met in person, I said carefully. I'm Mackenzie Taylor. The change in his expression was immediate. His eyes widened, and he straightened to his full height. Mackenzie Taylor? From MTR Restaurant Group. His voice rose in surprise. The Mackenzie Taylor? From the corner of my eye, I could see heads turning at the main table. Heather had stopped mid-sentence, her attention drawn by the commotion. Yes, I admitted quietly, wishing I could disappear. Marcus Bennett's face broke into a broad smile. Everyone, he announced loudly, turning toward both my family and his staff. Do you know who this is? This is Mackenzie Taylor. What on earth are you doing sitting with my staff? Before I could respond, he continued excitedly, this is my new boss. Her company acquired our restaurant group last month. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the distant clink of glassware from the main dining room and the soft hum of kitchen equipment, but within our private room, not a sound. Jessica and Amanda exchanged shocked glances. Tyler's mouth actually dropped open. And at the main table, my family stared in collective surprise, none more stunned than Heather, whose face had drained of all color. We didn't. Marcus looked between me and the main table, confusion evident. Why are you seated with your family? The spotlight was now uncomfortably on me, with everyone waiting for my response. I struggled for a graceful explanation that wouldn't create more drama. There was a misunderstanding about the seating arrangements, I said diplomatically. It's not important. Marcus frowned, professional pride clearly wounded. Not important? Having the CEO of MTR Group seated at a staff break table? This is unacceptable. He turned to the nearest server. Please bring another chair to the main table immediately. Really, it's fine, I protested weakly, but Marcus was already in full host mode. Ms. Taylor, your company saved this restaurant. When the previous ownership group was considering selling to a chain that would have gutted our concept and staff, your offer preserved everything we've built. And your reputation in the industry is impeccable. He turned to my family, who were listening with varying expressions of shock, confusion, and, in Heather's case, mortification. Ms. Taylor's company is known for acquiring struggling but high-quality restaurants and revitalizing them while respecting their original vision. She's been profiled in Food and Wine, Restaurant Business, and just last month in Forbes. Mom's expression had transformed from confusion to radiant pride. Dad was blinking rapidly, processing this new information. My cousins looked impressed, and Aunt Patricia was whispering animatedly to Uncle Jim. Only Heather remained frozen, her celebratory role usurped by this unexpected revelation. Marcus continued enthusiastically. When we heard MTR was acquiring our group, the staff actually cheered. Your reputation for fair wages and promoting from within preceded you. Jessica nodded vigorously beside me. We were all hoping the rumors were true. My cousin works at your Chicago location and says it's the best management she's ever had. The server returned with an additional chair, which Marcus personally placed between Mom and Dad at the center of the main table. Please, he insisted, join your family. And allow me to bring a round of our finest champagne to celebrate both your mother's birthday and this fortunate coincidence. With all eyes on me, I had no choice but to stand and make my way to the main table. Mom immediately took my hand and squeezed it, her eyes shining with tears of pride. Dad awkwardly patted my shoulder. The closest he ever came to demonstrating affection in public. Why didn't you tell us your company bought this place? Mom whispered as I sat down. It just finalized last month, I explained softly. I hadn't had a chance to mention it. Across the table, Heather remained silent, her expression unreadable. The celebration continued around us, now with an added current of excitement as Marcus shared more details about the acquisition with my increasingly impressed family members. Your sister owns this place? Cousin Brandon asked Heather directly, his tone incredulous. Heather's smile was brittle. Apparently so. Full of surprises, our Mackenzie. As promised, Marcus returned with premium champagne, insisting on pouring the first glass for me himself. To Linda Taylor, he toasted, nodding respectfully to my mother, who raised such an accomplished daughter. And to new beginnings for Bellamy's under the MTR group. Glasses clinked. Mom beamed. Dad looked thoughtful. And Heather. Heather abruptly excused herself and headed toward the restrooms. I watched her retreat, feeling a complex mix of vindication and regret. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, reversing the humiliation Heather had planned for me. But the victory felt hollow. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and the pain in her expression was unmistakable. After a moment's hesitation, I placed my napkin on the table and stood. "Excuse me," I murmured to Mom. "I'll be right back." She caught my hand, understanding in her eyes. "Be gentle with her, Kenzie. She's always been harder on herself than anyone." I nodded and followed Heather's path toward the restrooms, bracing myself for the confrontation ahead. The restroom at Bellamy's maintained the same elegant aesthetic as the rest of the restaurant: marble countertops, soft lighting, and fresh flowers arranged tastefully beside the sinks. I found Heather leaning against the counter, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge. She straightened when I entered, quickly wiping beneath her eyes. "Come to gloat?" she asked, her voice tight with emotion. "Congratulations. You've officially won." I sighed, leaning against the opposite wall. "This isn't a competition, Heather. Isn't it?" She laughed bitterly. "It always has been. And you've always been winning, even when you were too busy to notice." The accusation stung, especially because from my perspective, the dynamic had been entirely different. "That's not fair. I've spent years trying to earn a fraction of the approval Dad gives you automatically." "Approval?" Heather shook her head in disbelief. "Is that what you think I have?" Dad hasn't talked about anything except Mackenzie's latest achievement at his poker nights for years. My younger daughter just opened her third restaurant. Mackenzie was featured in some fancy magazine. Meanwhile, I'm just here, doing exactly what they expected, being completely forgettable. I stared at her, genuinely shocked. That's not how I remember things at all." "Of course not," she snapped. "You were too busy becoming successful to notice how your success affected everyone else. Do you know what it's like being the sister who stayed? The one who has to hear about every award, every milestone, every triumph? The one who chose family over ambition and gets treated like she settled." Her words hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I'd assumed Heather's resentment stemmed from disapproval of my choices. I'd never considered she might actually envy them. "I didn't know," I said softly. "I always thought you looked down on my career. That you thought I was selfish for leaving." "I did think that," she admitted, her anger deflating slightly. "Sometimes I still do. But mostly I'm just jealous." I supplied gently. Heather's eyes flashed. "Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm jealous of my little sister who owns restaurants and gets written up in Forbes while I'm organizing bake sales for the PDA and trying to feel like my life matters too." The raw honesty of her admission hung between us. For the first time in years, we weren't hiding behind pleasantries or sniping with veiled insults. This was real. "Heather, your life does matter," I said, taking a tentative step closer. "You have beautiful children, a husband who adores you, and you've built a life that many people would envy." "Don't patronize me," she warned, but her tone lacked conviction. "I'm not," I insisted. "Do you know how many nights I've eaten takeout alone in my apartment, scrolling through your Facebook photos of family game nights and weekend barbecues? Do you think success keeps you warm at night or remembers your birthday without a calendar reminder?" Heather looked surprised. "You're lonely." The question was so direct, so unexpected, that I answered with uncharacteristic honesty. "Sometimes. Often, actually. I have achievements, but you have belonging. That's worth something too." A heavy silence fell between us, both processing revelations that contradicted years of assumptions. I shouldn't have seated you with the staff, Heather finally said, looking away. It was childish and mean. I wanted to feel superior for once. And I shouldn't have kept my connection to Bellamy's a secret, I admitted. Though honestly, I didn't know we were coming here until you mentioned it. The acquisition is still new. Heather shook her head, a reluctant smile forming. Of course. Even when I try to put you in your place, you turn out to secretly own the place. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. After a moment, Heather joined in, her laughter tinged with lingering embarrassment, but genuine nonetheless. We've been acting like we're still teenagers, I said when our laughter subsided. I started it, Heather acknowledged. I've been starting it for years. And I've been avoiding dealing with it, I countered. Running back to New York at the first sign of tension instead of staying to work things out. Heather dabbed at her eyes with a paper towel. Mom must be wondering where we are. Probably, I agreed. Though I think she knew exactly where I was going when I followed you. She always does, Heather said with a small smile. Remember when we were kids and she'd separate us before we even started fighting? She'd say she could feel the storm coming. I nodded, remembering those moments vividly. She'd send you to the backyard and me to the front porch until we cooled off. We should get back, Heather said, straightening her dress and checking her makeup in the mirror. It's her birthday, after all. As she reached for the door, I gently caught her arm. Heather, wait. I think we need to talk more about this, but not here, not now. Maybe tomorrow? Before I head back to New York. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, tomorrow. And Heather? For what it's worth, I've always admired how good you are at the things I struggle with: building a home, maintaining relationships, being present for the people you love. That's success too. Her expression softened. Thanks, Kenzie. That means a lot coming from you. We returned to the private dining room together, the tension between us noticeably diffused. Mom gave us a knowing look as we took our seats, while Dad remained oblivious, deep in conversation with Marcus about the restaurant business. Everything okay? Mom whispered. Getting there, I replied, squeezing her hand. Happy birthday, Mom. The remainder of the evening unfolded with surprising pleasantness. Marcus insisted on giving our family a tour of the kitchen, where I couldn't help offering a few suggestions about equipment upgrades I'd been considering for all our locations. The executive chef, initially wary of the new ownership, visibly relaxed when I praised his duck confit and asked detailed questions about his sourcing for local ingredients. You actually know food, he said with undisguised surprise. The last owners couldn't tell a roux from a reduction. Culinary school before business school, I explained. I believe you have to understand the heart of a restaurant, the kitchen, before you can successfully manage the business side. As we returned to the dining room, I noticed Heather watching me with a new expression, not jealousy or resentment, but something closer to genuine interest. For the first time in years, I felt like my sister was actually seeing me, not just the success I represented. The evening wound down with dessert and coffee. Mom, opening her gifts, her reaction to the pearl necklace was everything I'd hoped for, and final toasts. When it came time to leave, Marcus insisted the entire meal was on the house, despite my protests. Please, Ms. Taylor, he said quietly. Allow me this small gesture. Your investment saved 37 jobs at this location alone. A complimentary dinner is the least we can offer. In the parking lot, as valets brought our respective vehicles, Mom pulled both Heather and me into a hug. Best birthday ever, she declared, looking between us with meaning. My girls finally talking instead of sniping. That's better than any present. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. Proud of both you girls, he mumbled, unaccustomed to emotional declarations. Different paths, both doing well. It wasn't much, but coming from our stoic father, it felt significant. Heather and I exchanged glances over Mom's head, a silent acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, we could build something better between us. As I watched my family drive away, Marcus approached me once more. Miss Taylor, I apologize again for the seating confusion earlier. Had I known you were joining us tonight. Please call me Mackenzie, I interrupted. And there's no need to apologize. Family dynamics are complicated. He smiled knowingly. Aren't they just? My brother and I co-owned our first restaurant. Nearly killed each other before we learned to work together. And now? Now he runs our catering division, I handle the restaurants, and we only argue during holiday dinners, strictly as amateurs. He handed me his card. I look forward to working with you during the transition. Your reputation in the industry is stellar. I accepted the card, already thinking about the potential Bellamy's represented. I'm excited to see where we can take this restaurant. The foundation is excellent. As I drove back to my parents' house that night, I reflected on how differently the evening had unfolded from what I'd expected. What began as humiliation had transformed into revelation, and possibly the beginning of healing a relationship I'd nearly given up on. Tomorrow's conversation with Heather wouldn't be easy. Years of resentment and misunderstanding couldn't be resolved in a single bathroom confrontation. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about my relationship with my sister, and that was worth more than any business acquisition. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect early summer day that made Maplewood look like a scene from a nostalgic movie, dappled sunlight through mature trees, neat lawns, and the distant sound of a lawnmower creating the quintessential suburban soundtrack. I woke early. Habit from years of pre-dawn starts to handle restaurant deliveries and baker schedules. The house was quiet as I made my way downstairs, expecting to find myself alone. Instead, Mom sat at the kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, still in her robe, and looking happily tired from the previous night's celebration. You still get up with the birds, she observed as I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd already brewed. Some things never change. I smiled, settling across from her. Some habits are hard to break. Though these days I'm usually heading to the gym at this hour, not sneaking out to watch Food Network before everyone wakes up. I remember finding you at 5 in the morning, taking notes on Jacques Pepin's techniques. Her expression turned thoughtful. You always knew exactly what you wanted, Kenzie. It scared me sometimes, how determined you were to leave. The confession surprised me. I wasn't running away from family, Mom. I was running towards something else. I understand that now. She reached across the table to pat my hand. And after seeing you in your element last night, you found what you were looking for, didn't you? The question gave me pause. Had I? The professional success was undeniable. Awards, accolades, financial security beyond what my childhood self could have imagined. But success wasn't the same as fulfillment. Parts of it, I answered honestly. The business is everything I hoped for. The personal side is still a work in progress. Mom nodded sagely. That's life for you. We're all works in progress until they put us in the ground. She sipped her coffee, then added, You and Heather seemed to reach an understanding last night. We made a start, I acknowledged. We're supposed to talk more before I leave. Good. She's coming for breakfast with the kids. Brad's at a golf tournament. Mom stood, moving to the refrigerator. I'm making my famous French toast. Still your favorite. The mention of Mom's French toast, thick-cut brioche soaked overnight in a vanilla cinnamon custard, brought an immediate smile. Absolutely. As Mom began preparing breakfast, I offered to help, falling into a comfortable rhythm of slicing fruit while she handled the cooking. We chatted about inconsequential things, neighborhood gossip, Mom's garden plans, a book we'd both recently read. The ordinary domesticity felt both foreign and familiar, a glimpse of the parallel life I might have led had I made different choices. The front door opened around 8, followed by the unmistakable sound of children's excited voices. My niece Emma, 7, and nephew Jackson, 5, burst into the kitchen with Heather following more sedately behind them. Aunt Kenzie! Emma exclaimed, spotting me at the counter. Mom said you own the restaurant where we had Grandma's party. Sort of, I smiled, bending to her level. My company owns it, which means I help make sure it runs well. Do you get free ice cream whenever you want? Jackson asked with the perfect logic of a 5-year-old. Not exactly, but I do get to taste all the desserts to make sure they're delicious enough to serve. His eyes widened. That's the best job ever. It is pretty great, I agreed, ruffling his hair. Heather stood awkwardly in the doorway, watching our interaction. Unlike yesterday's polished appearance, this morning she wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Without her armor of perfection, she looked younger, more like the sister I remembered from childhood. Good morning, she said, her tone carefully neutral. Something smells amazing. Mom's making French toast, I replied, matching her casual tone. I'm on fruit duty. I'll set the table, she offered, moving to the cabinet that had held dishes for as long as I could remember. The children, oblivious to the undercurrents between adults, chattered excitedly about the previous night's adventure, particularly impressed by the kitchen tour and the super fancy bathroom with real cloth towels. Breakfast progressed with surprising ease. Mom kept conversation flowing. Dad joined us midway through, having slept in, a rare luxury for him, and the children provided perfect buffers against awkward silences. Heather and I maintained polite distance, both aware of the pending conversation, but unwilling to disrupt the pleasant family meal. After breakfast, Mom announced she was taking the kids to the park to feed ducks, giving Heather and me a meaningful look that left no doubt about her intentions. Dad mumbled something about checking the gutters and disappeared outside, leaving Heather and me alone in the suddenly quiet kitchen. Should we clean up first? Heather asked, gesturing to the breakfast dishes. Sure, I agreed, grateful for the activity to occupy our hands and ease us into more difficult territory. We worked silently for a few minutes, Heather washing, me drying and putting away, remembering without being told where each item belonged. Some knowledge never leaves you, no matter how long you've been gone. I've been thinking about what you said last night, Heather finally began, eyes fixed on the plate she was scrubbing. About being lonely. I never considered that. In my mind, you had this perfect, glamorous life. I placed a dried mug in the cabinet before responding. And I thought you had the perfect, stable life. Funny how we each envied what the other had. I don't know if envy is strong enough, Heather admitted, handing me a dripping plate. Sometimes it felt like pure resentment. When you left for culinary school, everything changed. Suddenly, you were the family success story. That's not how I experienced it, I countered. Every call home, I felt like I was defending my choices. Dad constantly asked when I was going to get a real job with benefits and security. While he bragged about you to everyone else, Heather said with a wry smile. Classic Dad. I leaned against the counter, considering this new perspective. We've been getting different versions of the same family, haven't we? Heather nodded slowly. I think we have. Why did you seat me with the staff last night? I asked directly, needing to address the elephant in the room. Really? She flinched slightly but didn't dodge the question. I wanted to embarrass you, she admitted, voice low with shame. To make you feel small for once. To show everyone that your big, successful life didn't make you better than us. She looked up, meeting my eyes. It was cruel and childish. Her honesty was disarming. Thank you for admitting that. I've been jealous for so long it started feeling normal, she continued, shutting off the water and drying her hands. Every time you visit, it's like this spotlight follows you, and I fade into the background of my own life. We moved to the living room, settling on opposite ends of the couch where we'd once fought over TV channels and boy bands. I never wanted to overshadow you, I said carefully. I just wanted to make something of myself, something different from what was expected. I know that now, Heather replied. But for years, I told myself you were selfish for leaving, for pursuing your dreams while I did the responsible thing. Staying close to home, helping with Mom and Dad, building a conventional life. It was easier than admitting I was too afraid to try something different. The admission hung between us, profound in its vulnerability. Were you afraid? I asked gently. You always seemed so confident about your choices. Heather laughed without humor. I was terrified of failing. You were always the risk-taker. I played it safe and then resented you for succeeding at the things I never had the courage to attempt. But you have succeeded, I insisted. You have a beautiful family, a stable marriage. Do you know how many nights I've come home to an empty apartment after a 16-hour workday and wondered if I made the wrong choice? She looked genuinely surprised. You have. Of course. Heather, success isn't just measured in magazine features and profit margins. What you've built matters too. She was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. I never thought you'd question your path. You always seemed so certain. I question it all the time, I admitted. Especially when I'm missing another family event, because some restaurant crisis needs handling. The business is demanding. Sometimes I wonder what I've sacrificed for it. Like having a family of your own? She asked perceptively. I nodded, feeling unexpectedly emotional. That, among other things. Relationships are hard when you work the hours I do. My last boyfriend called me pathologically unavailable when he ended things. Ouch! Yeah, not my finest moment. I smiled ruefully. The point is, I don't have it all figured out either. I'm successful in one area of life and struggling in others, just like everybody else. Heather considered this, then asked, Do you regret it? Leaving? Building what you have? No, I answered without hesitation. I love what I do, even with its costs. Do you regret staying? She thought longer about her answer. Not regret, exactly. But sometimes I wonder about the roads not taken. If I'd gone to college instead of marrying Brad right away. If we'd moved somewhere new instead of buying a house 3 blocks from where we grew up. It's not too late, I said. To try something different. Easy for you to say. I have kids, responsibilities. True. But that doesn't mean your life is set in stone. An idea that had been forming since last night crystallized suddenly. What would you think about working with me? Heather blinked in surprise. What? I'm serious. Bellamy's needs a new general manager. Someone local who understands the community and has strong organizational skills. You were always the most organized person I knew, and your banking experience would be valuable. You're offering me a job? Her tone was incredulous. Is this pity? It's business, I countered. And maybe a little family reconciliation. But mostly business. I need someone I can trust to maintain the restaurant's connection to the community while implementing our company's systems. You'd be perfect. I don't know anything about the restaurant business, she protested. You know more than you think after all those hours listening to me talk about it. I smiled. And the rest you can learn. I did. Heather looked overwhelmed. I need to think about it. Talk to Brad. Of course. No pressure. The position won't be officially posted for a few weeks anyway. I paused, then added, but I think you'd be amazing at it. You've always had the skills, you just needed the right opportunity. She studied me, searching for insincerity and finding none. Thank you, she said finally. For seeing something in me that I stopped seeing in myself. That's what sisters are supposed to do, isn't it? See the best in each other. I held out my hand. Truce? Instead of taking my hand, Heather surprised me by moving closer and pulling me into a hug. Awkward at first, then settling into something genuine. Truce, she whispered. When Mom returned with the children an hour later, she found us looking through old photo albums, laughing at forgotten memories, and sharing stories from our separate lives. Her smile said everything words couldn't: relief, joy, vindication. I knew my girls would find their way back to each other eventually, she said, settling between us on the couch. You're too much alike to stay at odds forever. Heather and I exchanged glances over Mom's head. For the first time in years, that comparison didn't feel like competition, just a simple truth about shared roots and parallel strengths. Don't get too excited, Mom, Heather said with a gentle smile. We've still got decades of issues to work through. But we've made a start, I added, feeling something long knotted begin to loosen in my chest. Mom patted both our hands. That's all I ever wanted. Monday morning arrived with the bittersweet awareness of departure. My flight back to New York was scheduled for early afternoon, leaving just enough time for a family breakfast before heading to the airport. I packed methodically, the weekend's events still processing in my mind. The reconciliation with Heather felt simultaneously fragile and profound, a new understanding that would require nurturing to fully heal years of misunderstanding. I wasn't naive enough to believe one heart-to-heart conversation had resolved everything, but it had opened a door long thought sealed. Downstairs, I found the kitchen already busy. Mom was making pancakes while Dad read the newspaper at the table. Heather sat beside him, laptop open, reviewing something with intense concentration. Morning, I said, accepting the coffee mug Mom immediately offered. Perfect timing, she replied. Pancakes are almost ready. Heather looked up from her laptop with a smile that held none of the tension of previous interactions. I've been researching your company, she admitted. Pretty impressive operations. Doing your homework already? I raised an eyebrow, settling across from her. Just preliminary research, she clarified. I haven't decided anything yet. But if I'm considering a career change, I should know what I'd be getting into. Dad lowered his newspaper, looking between us with confusion. Career change? What's this about? I let Heather explain, watching her grow animated as she outlined the potential position at Bellamy's. Dad's expression shifted from skepticism to consideration as she spoke. Restaurant management, he mused when she finished. Didn't see that coming. But you've always been good with people and numbers. You think I could do it? Heather asked, and I realized with sudden clarity how much our father's approval still mattered to both of us. Wouldn't have survived 30 years in management if I couldn't spot talent, he replied gruffly, which from Dad was practically a ringing endorsement. Mom placed a stack of pancakes in the center of the table. I think it sounds wonderful. My girls working together, who would have thought? We might kill each other within a week, I cautioned, only half joking. Or we might make a great team, Heather countered. We always did when we weren't competing. Breakfast progressed with surprisingly comfortable conversation. Dad asked thoughtful questions about the restaurant business, showing genuine interest in my work for perhaps the first time. Mom proposed a family vacation to New York, suggesting they could all visit my restaurants there. Bring the kids, I encouraged. I'll give them the VIP tour of our dessert kitchen. Jackson can taste test ice cream to his heart's content. As we cleared the dishes, Heather pulled me aside. Before you go, I wanted to give you something. She handed me a small envelope. Don't open it until you're on the plane. What is it? I asked, curious. Just a thank you. For seeing past my worst behavior and offering me a chance anyway. The simple acknowledgement meant more than any elaborate apology could have. That's what family does, I said, echoing her words from yesterday. I'm learning that, she replied with a small smile. The goodbyes were easier than usual, less final, more forward-looking. Dad actually hugged me without prompting, Mom cried, but with happy tears, and Heather promised to call later in the week to discuss the position further. As the taxi pulled away from my childhood home, I felt a peculiar mixture of emotions, the usual relief at returning to my familiar world, but also a new thread of connection I hadn't expected to forge this weekend. At the airport, waiting to board my flight, I received a text from Marcus Bennett, looking forward to our meeting next week. Bringing full financial reports and staff evaluations as requested. P.S. Your sister stopped by this morning to see the restaurant in daylight. Impressive woman. Good business instincts. I smiled, imagining Heather taking initiative to tour Bellamy's properly. Perhaps she was more serious about the position than she'd let on. Once settled in my first-class seat, drink in hand, I finally opened Heather's envelope. Inside was a faded photograph I hadn't seen in years, the two of us at ages 8 and 11, standing proudly in our grandmother's kitchen beside a lopsided cake we'd baked together. On the back, Heather had written, "Remember when we were partners instead of rivals? Maybe it's time to try that again. P.S. I still think we used too much vanilla." The memory hit with surprising force. The cake had been nearly inedible, but we'd been so proud of our independent effort. Grandmother had eaten an entire slice, declaring it memorable, diplomatically avoiding good or delicious. We'd giggled all afternoon about our culinary adventure. When had that easiness between us disappeared? When had collaboration turned to competition? The questions had no simple answers, but perhaps moving forward mattered more than dissecting the past. As the plane ascended, I watched Maplewood shrink beneath me, the town where I'd always felt constrained now seeming different, not a place I needed to escape, but simply one facet of my increasingly complex life. Back in New York, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. The management team noticed the change, with Rachel commenting that I seemed lighter somehow during our weekly meeting. I shared the broad strokes of the weekend's events, including the possibility of Heather joining our company. "Family working together can be complicated," Rachel cautioned, speaking from experience with her own brother's brief, disastrous stint in our accounting department. "Complicated is our specialty," I reminded her. "Besides, Heather needs this as much as Bellamy's needs her." In the weeks that followed, Heather and I spoke regularly, first about the potential position, then branching into other topics, her children's activities, my upcoming business trips, books we'd both enjoyed, mutual childhood memories long unmentioned. Each conversation built another small bridge across the chasm years of estrangement had created. A month after my visit, Heather accepted the position as general manager of Bellamy's. "Brad thinks I'm crazy," she admitted during our call. "But he also says he hasn't seen me this excited about something in years." "It won't be easy," I warned. "There's a lot to learn, and the restaurant business is demanding." "I'm counting on that," she replied with determination I recognized from our shared DNA. "I'm tired of easy and predictable." We established clear boundaries. I would remain her sister first, boss second. Day-to-day operations would be her domain, with quarterly reviews like any other manager in our company. No special treatment, but also no additional scrutiny because of our relationship. 3 months later, I returned to Maplewood for a scheduled visit to Bellamy's, coinciding with my nephew's 6th birthday. The restaurant had undergone subtle but significant changes under Heather's management. Service was sharper, local sourcing had expanded, and community engagement had increased through cooking classes and special events. "You've done amazing work," I told her during our official review meeting. "Customer satisfaction scores are up 12%, and staff turnover has decreased significantly." "I had good bones to work with," she acknowledged, echoing my own assessment from that first night. "And a surprisingly patient sister to answer my midnight panic calls about inventory systems." The birthday dinner that weekend was held at Bellamy's, with Heather moving seamlessly between roles as hostess, manager, and mother of the birthday boy. I watched her navigate these multiple identities with growing confidence, recognizing the strength that had always been there, waiting for the right opportunity to flourish. Mom leaned close during dessert, an elaborate superhero cake the pastry chef had created for Jackson. "I haven't seen either of you this happy in years," she observed. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns to get us where we need to be." Her words resonated as I reflected on the journey from that humiliating seating arrangement to our current reality. What had begun as Heather's attempt to diminish me had instead opened a path to healing and growth for both of us. The humiliation had been real, but temporary. The reconciliation, though still developing, promised something more lasting. Later that evening, after the celebration wound down, Heather and I lingered at the restaurant, sharing a bottle of wine after closing. "Do you remember what you said to me the morning after Mom's party?" she asked. "About success being measured in different ways?" I nodded, recalling our conversation on the couch. I've been thinking about that a lot, she continued. I spent years defining success by your standards, the acclaim, the achievement, the empire building. But I was applying the wrong measure to my own life. And now? I prompted. Now I'm creating my own definition. One that includes professional satisfaction and family fulfillment. Turns out I didn't have to choose between them after all. Her insight struck me as profound. Maybe neither did I said thoughtfully. I've always seen my personal and professional lives as separate realms, often in conflict. But watching you integrate them has made me reconsider some of my own choices. We clinked glasses, acknowledging the mutual influence we'd begun to have on each other again, not as competitors, but as sisters with complementary strengths and shared roots. The path forward wouldn't always be smooth. Old habits of comparison and competition occasionally resurfaced, requiring conscious effort to redirect. But with each family dinner, each business success shared, each honest conversation, the foundation grew stronger. Life rarely offers perfect resolutions, only opportunities to grow beyond our limitations and heal our deepest wounds. That humiliating moment at my mother's birthday had become a catalyst for transformation neither Heather nor I could have anticipated. Sometimes the moments that threaten to diminish us instead become doorways to something greater than we imagined possible. Sometimes the people who know exactly how to hurt us also hold the key to our healing. And sometimes the longest journey leads us right back home, not to the place we left, but to the relationships that shaped us, now transformed by the people we've become. If you've ever experienced family dynamics that felt impossible to navigate, I hope our story offers some encouragement. Healing is possible, even after years of misunderstanding. What's your experience with family reconciliation? Have you ever had a humiliating moment turn into an unexpected blessing? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most meaningful connections.